The Cold War was never cold. The Cold War is often remembered as a silent standoff. Two superpowers, nuclear missiles, political speeches, a world frozen in tension but never erupting into direct confrontation. But that image is incomplete. For millions of people across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East, the Cold War was not cold at all. It was violent, destructive, relentless. While Washington and Moscow avoided fighting each other directly, they fought everywhere else. The Cold War was not a pause between wars. It was a global conflict fought indirectly, strategically, and often brutally. To understand the 20th century, we have to understand this reality. After World War II, the world was physically devastated and politically unstable. Europe lay in ruins. Colonial empires were collapsing. Power vacuums were opening across continents. Into that vacuum stepped two new superpowers with incompatible visions of the future. The United States believed in a world shaped by market economies, political pluralism, and open trade. The Soviet Union envisioned a world structured around centralized control, socialist ideology, and security through ideological expansion. These systems were not just different, they were mutually threatening. The fear was not simply military invasion, it was ideological spread. Both sides believed that if their rival system expanded, it would eventually undermine their own survival. That fear shaped everything that followed. The first major explosion of this tension came in Korea. In 1950, North Korea, backed by the Soviet Union and later China, invaded South Korea. What began as a regional conflict rapidly became a proxy war. The United States intervened under the United Nations banner. China entered the war months later. The Korean Peninsula became a battlefield for competing worldviews. The war was brutal. Cities were destroyed. Millions died. Yet neither Washington nor Moscow formally declared war on each other. The superpowers supported, armed, supplied, and directed, but avoided direct confrontation. The pattern was set. The Cold War would be fought through others. This structure allowed escalation without total war. It also meant that peripheral regions bore the heaviest costs. In Vietnam, the pattern repeated on a larger scale. The United States viewed the conflict through the lens of containment and the domino theory. If one nation fell to communism, others would follow. The Soviet Union and China viewed Vietnam as a strategic front against American influence. What followed was not a cold conflict. It was a prolonged, devastating war. Bombing campaigns reshaped landscapes. Chemical defoliants scarred ecosystems. Entire generations were pulled into combat. More than 3 million people died. Yet even here, the superpowers avoided direct war against each other. They fought through supply chains, advisors, and proxies. The Cold War extended far beyond Asia. In Afghanistan, the Soviet Union intervened to stabilize a friendly government. The United States responded by funding and arming resistance fighters. What might have remained a regional insurgency became a decade-long war that drained Soviet resources and destabilized the region for decades to come. In Africa, newly independent states became arenas of competition. Angola descended into civil war with Soviet and Cuban support on one side and American backing on the other. In Latin America, coups and counter-coups reshaped governments, often with external encouragement or support. The Cold War was not confined to ideology or diplomacy. It penetrated domestic politics across continents. Intelligence agencies became central actors. The CIA and KGB conducted operations that ranged from espionage to regime influence. Governments were overthrown. Elections were manipulated. Insurgencies were fueled. For populations living inside these conflicts, the distinction between superpower rivalry and local war was meaningless. The bombs fell just the same. At the same time, the nuclear standoff imposed a strange discipline on the superpowers. Mutually assured destruction created a ceiling. Direct war between the United States and the Soviet Union risked annihilation. This risk forced them into indirect confrontation. Proxy wars became the pressure valve. Ironically, nuclear weapons both prevented global catastrophe and enabled sustained regional warfare. Because total war was unthinkable, limited wars became acceptable. This dynamic created a world of constant tension. Crises flared repeatedly. Berlin, Cuba, the Middle East. Each moment carried the risk of escalation. Each time leaders stepped back from the brink. The Cuban Missile Crisis revealed how thin the margin truly was. The world came within days of nuclear exchange. Yet even in that moment, back-channel negotiations and calculated restraint prevailed. The lesson was clear. Direct confrontation was too dangerous. Indirect competition would continue. Economic and technological competition became another battlefield. The space race was not just about exploration. It was about demonstrating missile capability and scientific superiority. The arms race consumed enormous resources. Military budgets expanded. Strategic planning became permanent. Meanwhile, societies lived under the shadow of possible annihilation. Civil defense drills, nuclear shelters, constant awareness of vulnerability. But the Cold War's violence was unevenly distributed. Western Europe rebuilt under American protection. The United States and Soviet Union remained largely untouched by direct combat after 1945. The destruction unfolded elsewhere. Over time, the strain accumulated. The Soviet Union faced economic stagnation and the cost of sustaining influence abroad. The United States grappled with domestic divisions intensified by foreign wars. Both sides paid high prices, though in different forms. By the late 1980s, the system began to fracture. Economic pressures, political reforms, and accumulated exhaustion reshaped the Soviet Union internally. The Berlin Wall fell. Eastern Europe shifted. The Cold War ended not with a final battle, but with structural collapse. Yet its legacy remained. Borders had shifted. Governments had been installed and removed. Entire regions bore scars that continue to influence global politics. Calling it a Cold War obscures the reality. It was cold only between the superpowers themselves. For many others, it was one of the most violent and transformative periods of the modern era. The Cold War reshaped alliances, accelerated technological change, and redefined global power structures. It embedded the United States deeply into international systems. It left unresolved tensions in regions that had been battlegrounds for larger ambitions. Understanding this history means recognizing that the absence of direct superpower war did not mean peace. It meant a different form of conflict, dispersed across the globe. The Cold War was never truly cold. It was a global struggle fought indirectly, strategically, and persistently for nearly half a century, and its consequences still shape the world today. If you want to explore more strategic histories that reveal what was really happening beneath the surface, subscribe and like to watch the next video. See you soon.